the Toberts, where we talk about thriving in and out of medicine, no matter where you are in your medical training or career. Together, Daren and I have over 80 years of combined experience of living within the culture of healthcare. I'm Sue Tobert, a recently retired pediatric cardiologist and certified physician development coach in my spare time.
And I'm Daren Tobert, a recently retired sleep medicine physician who previously practiced pulmonary and critical care. And right now I'm into a lot of personal finance topics, and I play a fair amount of golf. Today's topic is about physician coaching around development and fulfillment as a way to mitigate burnout and stay the course for a long and healthy career in medicine. Our guest is Dr. Francine Gaillour, CEO and founder of the Physician Coaching Institute.
Dr. Gaillour is a physician and professional certified coach, completing her medical training at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine and internal medicine residency at the University of Washington. She earned an MBA from the University of Tennessee Physician Executive MBA program, and her coaching education was through the Academy for Coaching and the Graduate School of Corporate Coaching. Francine founded the Physician Coaching Institute in 2008, and it was the first of its kind, a specialized coach training program for professionals who wanted to develop their expertise in working with physicians, clinicians, and the healthcare team. I have to admit, Francine is a physician leader and coaching visionary, and she's witnessed the power of coaching as a method to support physicians through all aspects of their professional journey. Her mission has been to make professional coaching an essential part of any physician development program. And Francine, I know you envision a future where healthcare embraces this culture of coaching, where every healthcare team member can be heard and well listened to. Welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and it's my pleasure to be here. Of course, I knew Sue, so I'm meeting the other Tobert for the first time. Daren, great to meet you.
So, Francine, you've clearly had an impact on the lives of many physicians, and I know how much Sue has enjoyed training and working with you over the past several years. So tell us your story and what led you to coaching and to developing this thriving learning program and support network for coaches.
Well, it was not a planned journey at all. It was very much I call it an organic, the natural development of events, of following the golden thread. So I trained in internal medicine, as you know, and then I practiced internal medicine for clinical medicine full-time for 5 years and then part-time for another 5 years. But my background was in healthcare technology, actually in biomedical engineering. And I always thought I would like to combine my biomedical engineering background with something. And so I actually transitioned out of clinical practice, full clinical practice, joined a software company as their medical director. This was in the early days of developing the EMR. Sorry, everybody, for the EMR. I did my best to inject a little workflow sensibility. But at that time, I felt that the EMR implementation was going to hit a wall in terms of culture. And I got very interested in culture change and transformation. I got very interested in leadership and how leaders lead change. And so I kind of accidentally found myself in this arena of culture change and then discovered coaching. I'd never heard of coaching. It turns out that as part of my role as a medical director, I was doing some informal coaching to the chief medical officers and the chief medical information officers of our client organizations, but I didn't actually put a name to it. I didn't say it was coaching, but it was shortly. I know, at least 15. Actually, it's been more than that, 20 years ago, that I discovered coaching as a profession. And at that time, I had transitioned out of the technology arena and had my own consulting business. And I thought, wow, maybe I can add coaching to this. Again, who knew of coaching? I didn't.
No.
I started my fledgling coaching practice with the intention of coaching physicians around transformation, whatever that meant. And eventually that part of my business as an independent consultant and coach really grew. And I coached a lot of physicians, a lot of what I call the frontline physicians, particularly physicians who were unhappy in their professional life, their professional world. I also coached a lot of physician leaders. And then I got it into my head somewhere around 2006, 2008 that I want to start my own coaching school because at that time I was approached by other coaches who were curious about me, a physician, doing peer-to-peer coaching. And I was approached by physicians who were very, very curious, not just the ones that I had coached, but other physicians wondering like, how did you do what you're doing? So that's how I started the Physician Coaching Institute, with the idea of building on the foundation of coach training that's already out there, but really layering onto that what I think are the very special aspects of working with physicians, because we're different, and we the way we grow up in medicine is very different than other professionals who maybe grew up at Microsoft or some other technology, the other knowledge workers the other knowledge workers that sometimes physicians are compared to. So
thank you for sharing that. As you're speaking about culture, I am dying to know what you have observed in the change in healthcare culture over time. I even have trouble defining what healthcare culture is, but I would love to hear some of your observations. What's changed, Francine?
It's interesting because I get that question periodically. I just got it yesterday, in fact. I was talking with somebody else in media. And I only have my experience, and then I have the stories that I hear from, of course, my clients of many years ago, and then our physicians who are coming into the Physician Coaching Institute now. So I think maybe there's probably three big things that I observe and hear are different. First is that, probably one of the biggest ones, I think there's more physicians now that are employees, right? The employees of either big corporate systems or big medical groups. And I think, 20 years ago, there were many more physicians who, we used to call it the cottage industry. Many more physicians were either had their own practice or were part of a group practice where they owned the business. So I think that's been a really big change that has impacted physicians' sense of agency and autonomy.
Yep.
So I think that's one big one. I think a second one is that there's a lot more transparency among particularly the younger physicians, talking about wanting work-life balance, expecting work-life balance, and not feeling like it's a bad thing to expect. And still, there's a fair number of physicians that are still in the sage years that are still practicing and who remember what it was like to take call every fourth night and to borrow money from the bank to build their practice. There's still not a big contingency, but there's still a fair number of physicians who are have that as their memory, their journey. So maybe 5 years ago, I used to say that there was a tension between those two groups in terms of the culture. I think the expectation now that there be some boundaries, some balance, I think is a huge change. And then I think the third thing is just the overall demographics. I think there are so many more women in medicine now. I think if I remember a statistic that women now make up 50%, maybe a little bit more, of medical school classes. And so you have more women who are thinking ahead about raising a family, and a lot of women who are maybe having children, certainly earlier than I did. I felt like I wait many years at the time or could afford to do that. Not so much from a financial perspective, but just in terms of like, you can't drop the ball at any point. So I think that's been a real big change. And again, how it's contributed to culture, I think the culture is still evolving, but those I see are three big factors that are impacting how physicians view the profession and how they view themselves in the profession. Am I like totally committed, this is my life, this is my calling, on one end, versus at the other end is, I really enjoy this as a profession, and I am going to, when I go home, I'm going home, and I'm not going to be worrying about the
Right.
business or the patients.
Yeah.
I think that everything you said there, I completely agree with. But one observation I would make is just among my normie friends, non-physician friends, those cultural changes are very obvious and present for any physician. But for non-physicians, they don't understand any of this. To them, the doctor is still the sophisticated gentleman in the white coat, type of approach, and they still expect physicians to be there from cradle to grave. And so our culture's evolved quite a bit, but it really hasn't translated into the general culture yet.
Well, yeah, and I think, Daren, when I hear you say that, I think how as you said, the normies, the non-physicians, which are patients, right? They're all patients or patients. I think the way it impacts them is that they're noticing perhaps the less continuity of care and more chopped up shift work. Like we see it, we feel it, right?
Yeah.
But they feel it, but they may not be able to connect the dots between, I can't get a hold of my physician after 5 o'clock. I only talk with a nurse after 8 o'clock, and they feel it, but they don't know what's behind the scenes in terms of some of the factors. Again, there's more factors than that, but those are
Right.
as impacting how physicians are in the workplace and what they expect of each other, especially. What do we expect from each other?
This little idea pops into my head as we're sharing this. On one hand, we're butting up against this wall of corporate culture that is unfamiliar to us. And so many of us still, like you said, maybe those further along in our career, are also trying to altruistically balance how we care for our patients. And when I think of work-life balance, I used to think of plates in the air. Literally, right this second, a tightrope popped into my head. We're not balancing plates. We're walking on a tightrope between these two things that have got us twanged, and it's almost impossible. I feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. Well, it's, I guess, people use the word work-life integration. I kind of all the words you can use, that's probably the one I like the best, because, of all the people that I have coached, the physicians that I've coached who are in medicine, want to stay in medicine, they still feel like they have something to contribute. There's still a lot there. There's still a lot of joy to get out of the profession, but it's a matter of how do you do it?
Right.
And, because it's not just the physicians that you're a part of, it's a whole healing community. You're the nurses, the assistants, it's best case scenario. It's a lot of fun to be part of a really good team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Supportive, and you don't get that opportunity. You don't get those kinds of settings in too many other places, too many other professions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. I'm curious with the shifts that have gone on. There's so much talk about in the lay press, at least, in the literature, like burnout, moral injury, physician distress. Like it's all very negative and draws one kind
Gloomy.
of downward. And to flip it on the other side, because I know this is really what you are about, and the Physician Coaching Institute is about, is seeking fulfillment and career development. What are your thoughts on how we can do that without being consumed by the system?
From a coach's perspective, as we go to where the client wants to go, and the clients want to go towards fulfillment, joy, energy, bounce in my step. It doesn't mean that they are not and have not experienced low times. And I am resisting using labels too much.
Right.
Because physicians tend to, make pathology of normal feelings. Like, I'm feeling inadequate, or I'm feeling insecure, like everybody's got imposter syndrome now. I'm not to say that doesn't exist, but I am also aware that physicians have a hard time getting in touch with their own feelings of being human, okay? Being human. Not
Yeah.
to feel unfulfilled. You don't have to put a label on it. There certainly has been, particularly with COVID, very, very difficult for physicians, and particularly post-COVID, it was almost even worse. But going back to this idea from a coach's perspective, we want to coach to where the client wants to go, and so coaching is a resource, and individuals come to coaching voluntarily. And so those who come to coaching, they are in a state where at least they are aware there's potential for them. There's possibility. That is kind of almost the definition of coaching, is that you are supporting the client's development, their own personal development, their own potential. So it's not like coaching is a hose that you spray across the health system. Everybody's suffering, and now they're all kind of coated with some sort of Teflon. That's not what coaching is. And I think that's where it's important for anyone who's thinking about becoming a coach. Yes, we know you want to help your colleagues, you want to support your colleagues, and it's important for you to be aware that there are some individuals who are ready to be coached, who are ready to step up and say, I want to be a partner in my own development, and I am ready to develop my potential, as opposed to feeling like a coach needs to go in there and fix the moral injury and fix the hurts and fix the system. That's not how coaching is. It's very much a partnership with the individual, and the individual has agency and autonomy and is fully invested in their development. It's a big difference between, coaching and therapy.
Sure.
As you're aware.
Yeah. Well, and even mentoring, coming in as an expert to help someone move forward. And, that's not what coaching is. I think we've used thought partner a lot as a definition of coaching, coming alongside each expert in their own area to move the client forward.
Right.
Yeah. 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 It's a beautiful process.
So then the stats are saying that as many as 50% of physicians have at least some degree of burnout, as defined by a battery of symptoms and so on, and surveys. So with it being so high, might some career burnout be kind of necessary on the margins to make sure that the healthcare system is getting productive and getting their money out of us, so to speak, or what can this distress, this super high level of distress, teach us?
That's interesting, Daren. This idea of two thoughts. One is the medical profession, is there a certain amount of, on the margin, is there a certain amount of stress or demands that are never going to go away just because of the nature of the profession?
I was when I brought that up, I was thinking of the Starling curve. There's a and we all have to perform close to an optimal level on a Starling curve. For us to get into medicine to begin with, and then to succeed in medicine. So I'm just kind of wondering if some of that tension and, borderline overstress is almost par for the course kind of thing.
Well, so I think that's one kind of mini little topic to address. The other is, how much do physicians really know themselves when they start down a path of going to medical school and even residency and fellowship? Do physicians really know how to get their fulfillment and satisfaction from the profession? Because I think most physicians don't know how. And so just to address the first one briefly, because that's kind of a system thing. We take care of patients as physicians, and patients get sick, they die. And a lot of that responsibility is on us. What other profession is there that if you make an error, somebody can die? that's never going to go away. That's part of the medical profession, and that's part of what it means to be not just a physician, to be in that healing community. So how do we support each other to do the best we can as a team, not just the physician being the autonomous decision maker? How do we support each other to do the best that we can, to have the best knowledge that we need in order to make decisions? So that to me is a system. That to me is a system question. How do we function as a team so that when things sometimes go bad, not because of maybe an error, but sometimes it is an error, but how do we support each other so that we know we are working the best we can, where we've integrated clinical process improvement, we're doing the best. And that's where I feel like there's a lot, as you know, the last 20 some years, and there's been such incredible developments in clinical process improvement, in teams working together. So if a health system is not doing that well, then shame on them, because that's something that the health systems should be supporting the whole team to make decisions well, so that when you go to bed at night, you're worried about a patient, you can trust that, all right, whoever is covering, the hospital is covering at night, you feel like you're part of a team, you did your part, now you can go home and rest. And you're still up at, thinking, ruminating up at night, then you're maybe not part of a team where you can trust each other.
Yeah.
But the other aspect of fulfillment in medicine is something that I observed in myself. It took me many years to figure this out for myself. Way too late. Is that, every individual is different. We have different core strengths, different core values. And if you're called to medicine, you may have been called to some aspect of it. Maybe you were part of a research team when you were in college, and that's what was the spark that brought you into medicine. Maybe you shadowed a physician and you really liked the patient-physician interaction, and that's what sparked your interest. Everybody has come into medicine, every physician, I think for a different reason. There was a different spark that brought them into the profession. But when you now are, let's say you're going to finishing your residency or your fellowship, you don't know what to expect, and what the reality of your practice may not actually fit your natural strengths, your natural, what I call STG, strengths, talents, and gifts. I'll use myself as an example. I was very much intrigued with medicine when I was in engineering, and one of our last classes was on biomodeling. So you're doing a computer modeling of physiologic functions, and the book was on anatomy and physiology. So I was very drawn to the intellectual aspects and the kind of the engineering aspects of medicine. And then once I, got into clinical practice, it was actually very kind of routine, right? Routine. I had a full practice within 2 years. I loved the building phase. I loved creating pamphlets for my patients. But after 2 years, there was nothing new. I felt like nothing new. I saw the fascinomas. I diagnosed the zebras. There was nothing new. But it wasn't until years later that I realized that one of my core values is creativity. And there was no for me as an individual, unique person, there was not enough opportunity in that clinical practice for me to express that core value, that very strong core value of creativity. And so I think there are other physicians who, that's why I say it's important for young physicians to know thyself. What are your core values? What are your core strengths? Start thinking ahead about how you can structure your clinical practice, or what specialty field you can go into that really takes advantage of those core values, or where you can apply those core values, core strengths on some regular basis. And we know actually from studies that individuals who are able to apply their natural strengths, at least 20% of the time, really experience fulfillment. So when I hear people that physicians are burnt out, I don't want to assume that it's because it's a patient workload. It may just be that they're not a right fit. Either the pace, too small, too fast, too slow. The variety may not be what they want. That's why I always use the word fulfillment. And it's really important for individuals to know your core values, your core strengths, because they're so tightly tethered to your ability to find fulfillment and meaning
Mhm.
but particularly for medicine. You have to be kind of creative about how you can apply those core strengths and core values.
It makes me wonder then what needs to shift so that we're learning this kind of personal observation earlier in our training. It's such a narrow path that we enter into when we're
Very
in
much.
medical school, right?
Yes.
And residency, and the whole surprise of coming into practice. Then I really appreciate what you're saying about that. How do you get prepared? Um,
Uh-huh.
and so I know there's lots of work being done exploring what do we do to kind of assist residents and fellows and trainees
Uh-huh.
to not kind of enter into that greater degree of distress. But what are your thoughts there? What should we be doing earlier?
A couple of things, and you're right. The study of medicine, it's very deep, but very narrow. So, and most physicians, A students, B plus at the worst, right? So we're all very competent,
Yeah.
very smart, but that's not the same as core strength, not at all. So what I appreciate is, you can do things like Myers-Briggs or DISC, those kinds of behavioral styles. I think those are really useful, primarily to understand how you learn, how you take in information. So these are what I call self-awareness tools from a
Sure.
coach's perspective. So something like a DISC, Myers-Briggs, those are really useful to figure out how you best learn, how you take in information, your preferences for communication. Those are really important to learn early on. And that's the only thing that I would say get out of those behavioral assessments.
Mhm.
The other assessment or tool that I really wish all medical students, residents, fellows would do at some point is a strengths articulation process. And there's one for your listeners. They can do it kind of solo. It's nice to do it with the coach, but there's an organization called the Center for Dependable Strengths. And they have a wonderful kind of a self-guided kind of a qualitative tool, kind of a walkthrough where
Yeah.
you can kind of get an idea of what are your natural strengths. And you can also do an online assessment. There's one that's called Clifton Strengths Finders.
Mhm.
That to me, it's that one. I really highly recommend that they work with a coach to do that, and it's more of what's called a quantitative strengths finder. I prefer the Center for Dependable Strengths. I prefer their qualitative.
Mhm.
And so, to the extent that you understand what some of your core strengths are when you're in your late 20s, that's about the time people are, finishing medical or going on to residency. That's about the time you're ready for some self-awareness.
Yeah.
That's a really great time to get some idea as to what are my core strengths. Even if you may not recognize them yourself, your parents probably do, or your siblings probably see that in you by then, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
It's really important to understand that, celebrate your strengths, and start thinking ahead. How am I going to apply my strengths in this either clinical practice that I'm in, or even the research, whatever? How is this going to be most manifested? Because that's your key to fulfillment.
Right. Well, the self-guided part is really important because we're just not seeing across the board that training programs are offering these kinds of explorations. Our daughter, who's in her third year of medical school, in the first couple of years of medicine, had some kind of a well-being course, like become aware of these things. But it's like I'm thinking of leading the horse to water, right? But they may not drink.
Yeah.
Many students, and especially I'm early 20s, they're pre-contemplative. They don't know what they don't know, nor do they want to think about it, right?
Right.
And that's part of the journey of self-awareness as well.
I think that's very true. I've thought for many years now that had I known then what I know now, at least a little bit,
Yeah.
I probably would have picked a different specialty.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and even listening to your first couple episodes, the two of you, and Daren, you've made several references to your interest in financial planning or personal finance. I mean, that's obviously been such an important thread. And, had you known that sooner, you might have not only chosen a different specialty, you might have decided, gee, I think I'll, leave clinical practice, maybe not entirely, but maybe become a leader focusing on any area that will take advantage of my strengths there.
Mhm.
So again, this is not about leaving clinical practice. It's about knowing yourself. And I have to tell you, I have had so many clients, physician clients, like for, let's say we've done the DISC, which is a behavioral assessment, and we use it primarily to understand your communication preferences. I've had so many physicians who are mid-career, late career, who said, how come nobody told me this? How come nobody told me the cheat sheet? The cheat sheet, particularly for communication, because they realize they could have avoided some stress and tension that they were experiencing with colleagues. If they only knew we don't have any deep-seated hostility, we just have a different preference for how we communicate. And it's like, oh, wow. Because physicians are smart. They get it right away.
But we're all walking blind up until with the time we reach our 40s and 50s, right? And which is why what you do is so important, Francine. And I know that it has been such a privilege for me to connect with you over many, many years and be part of PCI. This growing an awareness, right, around coaching or just kind of a personal growth, and how to do that. I just think coaching is kind of at the ground level, so organic and natural. How about for leadership though? Like, how do we get our leaders to kind of wake up?
Wake up to coaching, you mean?
Well, wake up to communicating well. I think that's
yeah.
probably a lot of it there, right? The communication piece, the connection piece. We kind of live in this demand command style of communication day in and day out in medicine. Bad habit, really bad habit. How do we help lighten one another's load through improving communication? I don't know.
Right. Well, and for leaders, I think it's absolutely incumbent on them to be coached. And most of them see that as a perk anyway, to have to work with a coach. And one of the leaders that I have coached over my many years of coaching, they a lot of them have their MBA too, and they're still learning so much about themselves, about their preferences for communication, about their strengths as a leader. Like, not only what is my strengths as a person, how do I apply that so that I'm fulfilled as a person in my role, but also what are my strengths as a leader? How do I take advantage of those strengths so that I am doing not only my job, but also connecting? But one really important thing about leaders, and this is actually reflected in a study that came out about 2019, I think, about the impact that leaders have on physicians and physician fulfillment. And it's really a significant impact to the extent that leaders can recognize the strengths of the individuals in their team, not just the physicians, but to the extent that they recognize, like specifically acknowledge the individuals, particularly the physicians. I mean, whoever acknowledges us, right? The only kind of feedback we ever get is are we in the 90th percentile, the 40th percentile?
Right.
We're always acknowledged for, or not acknowledged, we're always given feedback in terms of gaps. What are your gaps? You're not in the 90th percentile, you got a gap. So physician leaders, it really is incumbent upon them to learn how to acknowledge particularly the physicians who are part of their team, and be very specific. Like, Sue, I want to acknowledge you for the sensitivity that you brought to the meeting today. And very difficult topic that was difficult for us to discuss, but the way you introduced it made it so much easier. So very specific acknowledgement is something that every leader has to learn. It's something that it's a tool, it's a cheat sheet kind of that I've given my clients who are leaders, and they love that. They love these very specific evidence-based tools and structures that make them more effective as leaders, and particularly if it improves the fulfillment of their colleagues.
Right. And that takes time too, right? The
Yeah.
pressure of
Yeah.
time, it works against us a lot.
Yeah. It's much easier to say, great job, Daren. And, right? It's easy and fast, but it's not very specific, right?
Not very specific or
It's
useful,
much
yeah.
It takes time to say, Daren, I so appreciate the detail that you put into that business plan for the merger contemplating with the group. It's really gonna benefit us as we go through and decide on pros and cons. Thank you for putting that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice feedback. Francine, I'm curious about if you have just a kind of a few comments you can make about what you offer with the Physician Coaching Institute, this coaching learning product that you have, this program. We just want to highlight that a bit.
Yeah, so the Physician Coaching Institute is a coaching school. So we train individuals, primarily physicians. We train them on coaching skills, how to bring a coaching approach to their communication. That's kind of the basic. We offer a course called Healthcare Peer Coaching Fundamentals, which is a 2-day very interactive, hands-on course. So at a minimum, we want you to get an introduction to what is professional coaching, or what is coaching skills as defined by the International Coaching Federation. So however you're using the word coaching in your health system, or however you've heard the word coaching, you will learn some coaching skills, coaching competencies, as we define them as through the coaching profession. So at a minimum, people will learn what's the difference between coaching and mentoring. Coaching and talking with the patient the way I always talk with the patient, or my leadership, the way I talk as a leader versus the way I talk as a coach, or what coaching conversation different than the conversation I have with my friends. So over 2 days, we want them to at least get an introduction to a coaching conversation, and to start using that approach integrated and incorporated in the way they communicate with each other, with peers, with patients. So that's we call it our foundation program. And then we have a certification program, which is about 6-7 months, which is a certified physician development coach program. So this is for individuals who want to do coaching at a professional level. So there might be individuals who are part of a well-being initiative in their organization, and they're already doing some informal coaching. So now they're going to be doing more formal coaching, bringing more coaching concepts, more competencies, more coaching tools and tools and structures to support their colleagues.
Right.
So, internal coaches like you, Sue, have been an internal coach. A lot of physicians who are going to be entrepreneur, external coaches, want to do that as either the next chapter in their career, or perhaps in addition to their clinical practice. Our programs are, again, very tightly aligned with the International Coaching Federation, which is the gold standard of the coaching profession. So they're going to learn coaching competencies, and on top of that, they're going to learn how to use a lot of tools and structures that I developed and have been field tested out there among our grads, very specific to physicians, very specific to how we learn, how we grow up, how we communicate, and also some of the obstacles that so many physicians have, right? Our difficulty with vulnerability, our difficulty feeling like, hey, I'm not, with feeling imperfect, say I'm not perfect, as opposed to I have imposter syndrome.
Sure, right. Well, Francine, thanks. That's fascinating, really. So we've talked about a few things during this podcast. Just want to wrap it up, bring it in for a landing here, and just get your quick take as to what your top 3 tips are for today's physicians entering practice as to how they can preserve their well-being.
Number one, number 2, number 3, physician, know thyself. So know thyself, and go through, either find a coach or on your own, Figure out what your communication preference is. That's going to keep you out of trouble with your team members. Communicate well. So doing like a DISC, the DISC, the DISC, I love that for communication. And I'm sure they can connect with you to do the in-scale one that we recommend. Doing the DISC, doing a strengths articulation process, going through a strengths articulation process. So knowing yourself as much as you can, that self-awareness, it may sound really dull and boring, but to the extent that you know yourself early on and start figuring out, how can I apply my God-given strengths and talents, not just your smarts, we're all smart, my God-given strengths, how can I apply that on a more regular basis as I go through residency, fellowship? Don't wait till you're 45 or 50 to figure that out. I think that's the most important advice I can give.
Okay. Oh, love it. That's great. Yeah. So we're late bloomers in that respect, but
yeah, absolutely.
Francine, thank you so much for your time and your graciousness for joining us today. We are just filled with gratitude, and all that you've shared has been so valuable. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being a part of your broadcast to the young emerging physicians, and I want them to stay in the profession. I want them to enjoy it. It's a joyful community, and it's going to be led by physicians, so get in there.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
And we'll see you next time, everybody.